Hi there, I'm Dre. On this week's video, I want to talk about the WHO Program for International Drug Monitoring, as well as the WHO Drug Dictionary. And I'm going to follow it up next week with another discussion on something called MHODrug. I'm going to look at how we keep track of drugs around the world, and in particular, what side effects or what adverse events or what reactions they have in humans. So for this week, like I said, we're going to talk about the WHO Drug Dictionary, as well as the WHO Program for International Drug Monitoring. And next week, we'll talk about MHODrug. So before we get started, if you're new to the channel, my name is Dre. I'm an independent IT consultant and also the creator and founder of the Dragon Network, which is an online member-based community where health IT professionals can discuss their experiences, share ideas, and collaborate with one another on all things health IT. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to network.dragon.com and check it out. So let's jump into today's video. Back in 1968, the World Health Organization, or WHO, created a program where their intent was to collect information about drugs from as many countries and as many organizations and populations as possible so that they could understand what human effects those drugs were having through their clinical trial stages as well as throughout their marketing. And the hopes that they had was that by putting all this information together, they could notice patterns and discover things quicker than each individual country could on their own. So back in 1968, they started this international program with 10 countries participating. So those countries are Australia, Canada, Czechoslovakia, Germany, Ireland, Netherlands, New Zealand, Sweden, the UK, and the US. So as of right now, there's more than 150 countries that are participating. So it started out with just 10, but it has, of course, expanded over time. As part of this program, there's an organization called the Upsella Monitoring Center, or UMC, that took over the administration and really the overhead and operational sort of care of this program back in 1978. It's an independent center for drug safety and scientific research. It's really focused on making sure that all of the participants have all the standards and the requirements in place that they need to prevent harm to patients with respect to drugs. So how do they keep track of these drugs? They keep track of them using the WHODrug Global Dictionary, which is the most widely used drug dictionary in the world currently. It is something that I'm just starting to learn about because I'm diving into clinical trial work a little bit more. My background is primarily in acute care health IT, so while I have done some projects on clinical trials, I haven't really sort of focused on what those standards and linkages and code sets are. So I'm just starting to dive a little bit more into that because I became quite curious as to how we're going to keep track of drugs and how we're going to exchange information around the globe once we get to the APIs or patients actually have access to their own data. So that's sort of where my focus originally started, and now that I've gone down this path, I've become incredibly interested and anticipate continuing to sort of dive into this one. So the WHODrug Global Dictionary covers prescription medications, over-the-counter drugs, pharmacist-dispensed products, biotech and blood products, diagnostic substances, which includes contrast media, as well as herbal remedies. So we need to keep in mind that they are creating this drug dictionary or maintaining this drug dictionary for 150 plus countries around the world. So if you just focus on prescription medications, it would be extremely challenging as what's available in one country may not necessarily be available in the other, what may be over the counter in one, maybe not available over the counter in the other, and things like that. They try to cover a broad space so that they can make sure they're incorporating everything they need to report back to those countries where they may find side effects, adverse events, or things that are happening that have the potential to cause harm to patients. The way the WHO Drug Dictionary is set up is each code or each item in the dictionary has an 11-digit alphanumeric code that's divided into 3 parts. So the first part is the drug record number, which consists of 6 characters, and it identifies the active ingredient. The second one is sequence number 1, and it's used to identify different variations of that active ingredient. So it therefore defines the active substance itself or combinations of substances or how that's put together. And then the third one is sequence number 2, which identifies the unique name of the record in the WHO Drug Dictionary. Each of the drug code items inside this dictionary is also connected to at least one code from the ATC classification system, so there's a tie back to that as well. So within the drug dictionary, they've got categories of things, just like we have categories when we're looking at all of our other code sets and standardization systems. So they've got diuretics, and they have depression drugs, things like that. They've got them grouped together and those are tagged inside that drug dictionary. As I mentioned, it is maintained by the UMC and it is utilized in many countries by the pharmaceutical industry as well as various different organizations for research, for clinical trials and things like that to identify drugs. It also has been mandated in several areas for use when it comes to clinical studies. For example, in March of 2019, the US Food and Drug Administration regulated that the WHO Drug Dictionary would be utilized in all clinical trial studies that were to take place within that country as of that date, where it would be applicable. So it is something that is, in addition to being utilized and leveraged across those 150 countries, something that's starting to sort of work its way more into regulatory bodies as becoming the standard that we're utilizing for clinical trials. The piece that I'm most interested in is understanding where the linkage is between the code sets that are utilized for clinical trials and the code sets that are actually utilized for just regular care of patients. Because they're linked together and they maintain history for decades, there is an interest on my part to understand sort of how we leverage that information and where that tieback is when we're using just regular marketed drugs currently. So after they finish their clinical trial stage and they've been in the marketplace for a long time, we're reporting adverse events and side effects and things like that, addictions. How is that actually tying back? And is it? Are we in a situation where we need to continue to code our databases and to understand sort of where that linkage occurs? Or is there some other way that those are linked together? So that's the type of information that I'm still diving into. So totally still learning this, but figured I would share what I'm learning along with you because I'm finding it so interesting and I thought that it might be helpful for others. So that is all that I have for this week. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and do that now. And as always, if you like the types of videos that I'm putting out there, go ahead and hit that like button. If you do know more about the WHODrug Global or you have it implemented in your organization for mapping for acute care or primary care purposes, let me know because I'm super interested in learning more about that. I will see you again next week and we're going to talk about the second piece for the WHO Drug Program for International Drug Monitoring, which is MEDRA. So I'll see you again next week.